The champagne glass in my hand was still half full when I heard it sharp, dismissive, wrapped in laughter that wasn't meant to include me. "You're just lucky," she said, loud enough for the circle of tailored suits and silk gowns around us to hear. Her name was Victoria, and she wore her family's name like armor. Old money, old power, old assumptions about people like me. I didn't respond. I never did. Not immediately. I'd learned that silence often said more than any defense I could muster. The Metropolitan Gala wasn't a place for confrontation, it was a place for appearances, for carefully constructed images that shimmered under crystal chandeliers. I was here because I'd been invited, though I suspected most people assumed I'd come as someone's guest, not as a donor myself. "Lucky," Victoria repeated, as if the word needed emphasis. She tilted her head, her diamond earrings catching the light. "I mean, we all know how these things work. Right place, right time. It's not like you built anything real." The others shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking between us like spectators at a match they hadn't bought tickets for. I recognized a few faces: a tech executive, a gallery owner, someone from the mayor's office. They knew who I was, or at least they knew my company's name. But standing there in a dress I'd bought off a sale rack and shoes I'd resold twice, I didn't look like I belonged. And to people like Victoria, appearance was everything. I took a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles dissolve on my tongue. The ballroom stretched around us, all marble columns and gold leaf, filled with people who measured worth in surnames and stock portfolios. I'd grown up in a studio apartment where the heat didn't always work. I'd put myself through community college waiting tables, then state school on scholarships and student loans that took me a decade to pay off. My company started in a shared office space that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Nothing about my life had been lucky, but I didn't say that. Not yet. "Some people work for what they have," I said quietly, meeting her eyes. "Some people inherit it. Both are valid, I suppose." Victoria's smile tightened. "Oh, don't be sensitive. I'm just saying you have to admit, timing matters. You launched right when the market was hot. Anyone could have done what you did, anyone." The word hung in the air like smoke. I wondered if she knew how many 16-hour days it took to build a business from nothing. How many times I'd been the only woman in a room full of investors who looked past me to ask if my male assistant who didn't exist would be joining us. How many doors had closed before I learned to pick the locks. "Maybe," I said, and left it at that. The conversation moved on, as it always did at these events, flowing towards safer topics: summer homes, charity boards, someone's recent acquisition of a Rothko. I stood at the edge of the circle, present but not quite included, watching the way they touched each other's arms when they laughed, the casual intimacy of people who'd known each other since boarding school. I'd been invited to the Metropolitan Gala because my company had donated. Not a small amount, enough that my name was printed in the program under the platinum tier, but I hadn't told anyone that. I never did. There was something about announcing your own generosity that felt wrong, like it canceled out the gesture. So I'd come quietly, wearing my sale rag dress, and let people make their assumptions. The evening wore on. Dinner was served in the grand hall, courses arriving on china so delicate I was afraid to cut my food too firmly. I was seated at a table near the back, with people I didn't know, who made polite conversation about nothing in particular. Victoria was several tables away, closer to the stage, laughing with people who looked like her, sounded like her, came from the same world she did. I ate slowly, listening to the ambient noise of 200 people pretending they weren't constantly aware of who was watching them. The gala was raising money for arts education in underserved schools, a cause I believed in deeply, having been one of those underserved kids once. The irony wasn't lost on me that most of the people here had probably never set foot in a public school. After dinner, the speeches began. The executive director of the foundation took the stage, thanking everyone for their support, listing off corporate sponsors and major donors, names I recognized from Forbes lists and society pages. I clapped politely, my hands barely making sound. Then she paused, looking down at her notes. "Before we continue," she said, her voice carrying through the microphone, "I want to take a moment to recognize someone whose generosity made tonight possible. I felt a small flutter of anxiety. I didn't like attention. I'd specifically asked to remain anonymous in all promotional materials. But sometimes these things slip through. This year's gala was made possible by a single donation that covered not just this event, but also funded 3 new after-school programs and provided instruments for over 500 students. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when people sense something significant is coming. This donor asked to remain anonymous, but I've been given permission to share their identity tonight. My heart started beating faster. I hadn't given permission. Had I? I tried to remember the paperwork, the conversations with the foundation's development team. Everything had happened so quickly. The person who funded this entire evening, the director continued, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found me, is here with us tonight. I felt every muscle in my body tense. Would you please join me in thanking? She said my name. My full name, clear and unmistakable, echoing through the ballroom. For a moment, nothing happened. Then heads started turning, people whispering to each other, trying to figure out who she was talking about. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table. She's here at table 17, the director added, gesturing in my direction. The spotlight found me. I stood because there was nothing else to do. The room erupted in applause, but it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I could see Victoria's table from where I stood. She wasn't clapping. She was staring, her face a careful blank that I recognized as shock, working hard to look like composure. The walk to the stage felt longer than it was. Every step was measured, deliberate, while hundreds of eyes tracked my movement through the crowd. I could feel the weight of their reassessment, the mental calculations happening in real time as they tried to reconcile the woman in the sale rack dress with the amount of money required to fund an entire gala. The executive director met me at the stairs, her hand extended, her smile genuine. Thank you, she whispered as I reached her. You've changed so many lives. I shook her hand, then turned to face the room. The spotlight was hot against my skin. I'd given presentations to boardrooms full of skeptical investors, pitched my company to venture capitalists who'd already decided I wasn't worth their time. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was personal. I don't have a speech prepared, I said into the microphone, my voice steadier than I felt. I didn't expect to be standing here. A few polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. I grew up in a neighborhood where arts education wasn't a priority. We didn't have music classes or theater programs. We had textbooks that were falling apart and teachers who paid for supplies out of their own pockets. I paused, letting the words settle. But I had one teacher who believed that every kid deserved a chance to create something beautiful. She stayed after school unpaid to teach a handful of us how to paint, how to see the world differently. I could see Victoria now, still frozen at her table, her face unreadable. That teacher changed my life. She showed me that I could build something from nothing, that my circumstances didn't define my potential. I took a breath. So when I had the opportunity to give back, to make sure other kids had what I didn't, was no question. This isn't charity. This is investment. In talent, in dreams, in futures that haven't been written yet. The applause started before I finished, building into something that felt less like politeness and more like recognition. I stepped back from the microphone, nodded to the director, and made my way off the stage. But instead of returning to my table, I walked toward the exit. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest of the evening, the networking, the small talk, the careful social choreography felt suddenly. I made it to the lobby before I heard footsteps behind me. Wait. I turned. Victoria stood a few feet away. Her composure cracked just enough that I could see the person underneath, younger than she seemed, uncertain in a way that money usually hid. I didn't know, she said. No, I agreed. You didn't. She looked down at her hands, at the champagne glass she was still holding. I assumed you did. The silence stretched between us. Not hostile, but not comfortable either. I could have walked away. Part of me wanted to. But there was something in her expression that kept me there. Something that looked almost like shame. My family's foundation donated too, she said quietly. 50,000. We thought that was generous. I didn't tell her how much I'd given. The number didn't matter. What mattered was the assumption she'd made. The casual cruelty of dismissing someone's entire life as luck. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. When we were talking earlier, you could have told me. Would you have believed me? She flinched. I don't know. That's why I didn't say anything. I shifted my clutch from one hand to the other. People like you don't see people like me until we're standing on a stage with a spotlight on us. And even then, you're not sure what you're seeing. That's not fair, isn't it? Victoria looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression, not quite understanding, but maybe the beginning of it. I'm sorry, she said finally, for what I said, for assuming. I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that was enough. The work you're doing, she continued, her voice softer now, with your company. I looked it up while you were speaking. It's impressive. Thank you. And this donation, it's more than impressive. It's transformative. I didn't respond. Compliments from people who dismissed me an hour ago felt hollow, even when they were sincere. I'd like to learn more, Victoria said, about what you do, about how you built it. If you're willing to talk. I studied her face, looking for the catch, the angle, the thing she wanted from me. But all I saw was genuine curiosity, and maybe a little bit of shame still working itself out. Maybe, I said, someday. I left her standing in the lobby and walked out into the night. The air was cool against my skin, a relief after the heat of the ballroom. My car was waiting, not a luxury sedan, just a reliable hybrid I'd bought used 3 years ago. The valet looked surprised when I handed him my ticket, like he'd expected me to be waiting for a driver. I tipped him well and drove home through streets that were quieter than they should have been for a Friday night. The city looked different from inside a car, removed, like watching a movie of someone else's life. I thought about Victoria's face when my name was announced, about the way the room had gone silent before the applause. I thought about the kids who would get instruments because of tonight, who would learn that they could create something beautiful even when the world told them they couldn't. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that was gentrifying but hadn't quite arrived yet. I'd bought it 5 years ago, when my company was still struggling, when I wasn't sure if we'd make it another quarter. I could afford something bigger now, something in a building with a doorman and a view. But I liked it here. It reminded me where I'd come from. I kicked off my shoes and stood at the window, looking out at the street below. A couple walked past, laughing about something I couldn't hear. A dog barked in the distance. Normal life, continuing regardless of galas and revelations and moments that felt significant but probably weren't, not in the grand scheme of things. My phone buzzed. A text from the foundation's director. Thank you again. You have no idea what this means. But I did know. I knew exactly what it meant, because I'd been on the other side of it once. I'd been the kid who needed someone to believe in her, to invest in her potential when she had nothing else to offer. I set the phone down and changed out of my dress, hanging it carefully in the closet even though I'd probably never wear it again. Then I made tea and sat on my couch, letting the silence of my apartment wrap around me like a blanket. The gala would be written about in the society pages. My name would appear in articles about philanthropy and women in business. People would reach out, some genuinely, some because they wanted something. That was how these things worked. Visibility came with a price. But sitting there in my small apartment, drinking tea from a mug I'd bought at a thrift store, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Peace. Not because of the recognition or the applause or even Victoria's apology, but because I'd done what I set out to do. I'd built something real, and no one could take that away from me, no matter what assumptions they made about how I got here. The night stretched ahead, quiet and mine. I woke the next morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were congratulations. Some were interview requests. A few were from people I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. I scrolled through them while drinking coffee, feeling the strange displacement of having become visible overnight. There was one message that stood out, sent at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about what you said, about assumptions, about not seeing people. I want to do better. Victoria, I stared at it for a long time before setting my phone down without responding. Work was my refuge. Monday morning, I walked into my office building the same way I always did, through the side entrance, nodding to the security guard who knew my name, taking the stairs instead of the elevator because I liked the quiet. My company occupied 3 floors now, a far cry from that shared office space that smelled like burnt coffee. We'd grown carefully, deliberately, never taking funding that came with strings I wasn't willing to pull. My assistant, Marcus, was already at his desk when I arrived. He looked up, grinning. "So, you're famous now." "I'm not famous. You're trending on LinkedIn. There are 3 articles about you in my newsfeed. The foundation posted a video of your speech that has 200,000 views." He handed me a stack of messages, and these are just the ones that came through official channels. I flipped through them. Interview requests from business publications, speaking invitations, someone from a morning show wanting me to come talk about women in tech and philanthropy. Delete them all of them, all of them. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He'd worked with me long enough to know when I was serious. "There's one you might want to see though. It came this morning." He handed me a handwritten note on expensive stationery. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, the kind they taught in private schools decades ago. "Dear Miss Chen, I'm writing to apologize for my daughter's behavior at the Metropolitan Gala. Victoria told me what she said to you, and I'm deeply embarrassed. I raised her to be better than that. I'm also writing to thank you, not just for your generosity to the foundation, but for teaching my daughter a lesson I apparently failed to teach her myself." She came home that night and cried for an hour. Then she asked me to help her understand how someone builds what you've built. She wants to learn. She wants to be better. "If you're willing, I'd like to invite you to lunch. No agenda. No networking. Just a conversation between 2 women who care about making the world a little less cruel. Sincerely, Margaret Ashford." I read it twice, looking for the angle, the thing she wanted from me. But the handwriting was too personal, the words too raw. This wasn't a business letter. This was a mother trying to fix something her daughter had broken. "What do you think?" Marcus asked. "I think people are complicated." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now." I set the letter aside and spent the rest of the morning in meetings, reviewing quarterly projections and discussing a new product launch. This was what I was good at: building things, solving problems, turning ideas into reality. The gala, the speech, the sudden visibility, that was noise. This was the signal. But the letter stayed in my mind, a small persistent presence I couldn't quite ignore. By Wednesday, I'd responded, not to Margaret Ashford, but to Victoria. I sent a single text: "Coffee, Saturday, 10 a.m. There's a place on 7th Street that makes good espresso." Her response came within minutes: "I'll be there." The coffee shop was deliberately unglamorous: exposed brick, mismatched furniture, a chalkboard menu that hadn't been updated in weeks. I arrived early and claimed a table in the back, away from the window. Victoria walked in exactly at 10, looking around uncertainly until she spotted me. She was dressed differently than she had been at the gala: jeans, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked younger, less armored. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from me. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. We ordered coffee from a barista with purple hair and tattoos covering both arms. Victoria watched her walk away, and I could see her trying not to look uncomfortable. This wasn't her world. That was the point. "My mother wrote to you," Victoria said. "She did. I didn't ask her to. I didn't even know she was going to until after she'd sent it." "I know." Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, even though it was too hot to drink. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About people like me not seeing people like you until you're on a stage with a spotlight. And you're right." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "I've spent my whole life in rooms where everyone looks like me, sounds like me, comes from the same kind of families. I thought that was normal. I thought that was the world. It is the world. Your world. But it's not the only world." "No?" I agreed. "It's not." She took a careful sip of coffee, winced at the heat. "I want to understand how you did it, how you built something from nothing." "Why?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Because I've never had to build anything. Everything I have was given to me. My education, my job at my father's firm, my apartment. Even my opinions were inherited." She paused. "And I'm starting to realize that maybe that's not something to be proud of." I studied her face, looking for performance, for the careful construction of someone trying to appear humble. But all I saw was genuine discomfort, the kind that comes from recognizing something ugly in yourself. It's not about building from nothing, I said finally. It's about building despite everything, despite people telling you that you can't, that you don't belong, that you're just lucky. I leaned back in my chair. You want to understand? Start by understanding that the world doesn't hand opportunities to everyone equally. Some of us have to take them. And even then, people question whether we deserve what we've earned. Victoria nodded slowly, like I did. Like you did. I'm sorry, she said again. I know I said it at the gala, but I don't think I really meant it then. Not the way I mean it now. What changed? I went home that night and looked up everything about you. Your company, your background, interviews you've given. I read about how you started. A booty woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and my phone vibrating with notifications. Emails, texts, LinkedIn messages, all from people who'd been at the gala, or who'd heard about it, or who'd read the early coverage in the society blogs that had already posted photos and breathless recaps. I scrolled through them while drinking coffee, still in my pajamas. Most were congratulatory. Some were transparently transactional invitations to speak at conferences, requests for meetings, pitches from nonprofits looking for funding. A few were from journalists wanting interviews. I deleted those immediately. I'd never been comfortable with press attention, and last night had already given me more visibility than I'd wanted. There was one message that made me pause. It was from Marcus Chen, the CEO of a tech company I'd admired for years. We'd met briefly at a conference once, exchanged business cards, never followed up. His message was short. "So what you did last night? Impressive. Let's talk." I stared at it for a long moment, then set my phone down. The coffee was getting cold. My company didn't need investors anymore. We were profitable, growing steadily, positioned well in our market. But Marcus's company was doing work that aligned with mine, using technology to solve problems that actually mattered, rather than just chasing the next acquisition or IPO. A partnership could be interesting, or it could be a distraction. I'd learned to be careful about opportunities that came too easily, that arrived wrapped in flattery and vague promises. People wanted things from successful women: our time, our money, our endorsement, our credibility. They rarely wanted to give anything back. But I saved his message. Maybe I'd respond later. Maybe I wouldn't. The weekend passed quietly. I worked from home, catching up on emails and reviewing quarterly projections. My team was small but talented. People I'd hired carefully over the years, who believed in what we were building. We had a video call Monday morning to discuss a new client pitch, and I didn't mention the gala. It wasn't relevant to the work. But on Monday afternoon, my assistant forwarded me an article from a business magazine. The headline read, "The Quiet Philanthropist: How One Woman is Changing Arts Education Without Seeking Credit." I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. The article was surprisingly well researched. It traced my company's growth, interviewed some of my early employees, spoke with the foundation's director about the impact of my donation. There were quotes from kids in the after-school programs, talking about learning violin and painting and theater. One girl, maybe 12 years old, said, "I didn't know I could be an artist until someone showed me how." That line stayed with me. The article also mentioned Victoria, though not by name. It referenced attendees who initially didn't recognize the donor's significance, which was a polite way of saying what had actually happened. I wondered if she'd read it. I wondered if she cared. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Hi, this is Emma Rodriguez from Channel 7 News. I'm working on a story about women in tech and philanthropy, and I'd love to interview you." "I'm not interested in interviews," I said. "But thank you. Just 15 minutes. We could do it over the phone if you prefer. I appreciate the interest." But no, I hung up before she could argue. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. I let it go to voicemail. This was the part I dreaded. The attention, the requests, the way wanted access to me because I'd been publicly recognized for something I'd done privately. It felt invasive, like someone had opened a door I'd deliberately kept closed. I turned my phone off and went for a walk. The neighborhood was quiet on a Monday afternoon. Most people were at work. I passed a bodega where I bought my morning coffee, the dry cleaner who knew my name, the park where I sometimes sat on weekends with a book. Normal life. Anonymous life. The kind of life where people didn't make assumptions about you because they didn't know enough to assume anything. I thought about what Victoria had said. Why didn't you say anything? The truth was more complicated than I'd admitted. I didn't say anything because I'd learned that proving yourself to people who'd already decided you weren't worth their time was exhausting and ultimately pointless. They'd find another reason to dismiss you, another way to minimize what you'd accomplished. Better to let the work speak for itself. Better to move through the world quietly, building things that mattered, helping people who needed it, and not worrying about whether anyone noticed. But now they'd noticed, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I walked for an hour, then circled back home. My phone was still off. It felt like a small rebellion, a way of reclaiming control over my own time and attention. The messages could wait. The interviews I wouldn't do could wait. Everything could wait. That evening, I made dinner nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables, and ate it while reading a novel I'd been working through for weeks. Fiction felt like a relief after the intensity of the weekend, a reminder that there were other stories in the world besides my own. Around 9, I turned my phone back on. The notifications flooded in. 43 new emails, 17 texts, 5 voicemails. I ignored all of them except one. It was from my mother. Saw the article. So proud of you, Mija. Call me when you can. I called her immediately. There's my famous daughter, she said when she picked up, her voice warm with affection and gentle teasing. I'm not famous, Mom. The internet says otherwise. I've been getting calls all day from people I haven't talked to in years, asking if I'm related to you. I groaned. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be proud. She paused. Are you proud? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I'm overwhelmed, I think. That's normal. You did something big, and people noticed. That's scary when you're used to being invisible. I wasn't invisible. I just wasn't loud, my mother finished. You were never loud. Even as a little girl, you did everything quietly. Got good grades quietly. Won awards quietly. Built a whole company quietly. She laughed softly. But quiet doesn't mean invisible, Mija. People see you. They've always seen you. You just didn't want to believe it. I sat down on my couch, the phone pressed against my ear. What if I don't want this? The attention, the interviews, all of it. Then you say no, you've always been good at that. But what if saying no makes me seem ungrateful, or like I don't care about the cause? You gave them $500,000, my mother said bluntly. I think they know you care. I laughed despite myself. She was right. The foundation had what they needed. The kids had their programs and instruments. My job was done. Everything else, the publicity, the recognition, the social currency, was optional. Thanks, Mom. Anytime. Now go to bed. You sound tired. I did sound tired. I felt tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying other people's expectations, even when you hadn't asked for them. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and thought about what came next. The gala was over. The revelation had happened. Victoria had apologized, or something close to it. The foundation had their funding. The articles had been written, but the work continued. My company still had clients to serve, problems to solve, people depending on us to deliver. The kids in those after-school programs would still need support, encouragement, someone to believe in them when they didn't believe in themselves. That was the part that mattered. Not the spotlight or the applause or the moment of vindication when people realized they'd underestimated me. Those things felt good briefly, but they didn't sustain anything. They didn't change lives. The work did. I opened my laptop and responded to Marcus Chen's message. Let's talk. How's Thursday? Then I went through my emails, responding to the ones that mattered, deleting the ones that didn't. By midnight, my inbox was manageable again. The world felt smaller, more contained. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, climbed into bed. Tomorrow would bring more messages, more requests, more people wanting pieces of me I wasn't sure I wanted to give. But tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight, I was just myself, in my small apartment, in my quiet life. And that was enough. I turned my phone back on Tuesday morning to find a message from Victoria that had come in late the night before. Can we talk? Not about apologies, about something else. I stared at it while drinking my coffee, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to leave it unanswered, to let the gala fade into memory and move on with my life. But there was something in the phrasing not about apologies that suggested she'd actually thought about what she wanted to say. I typed back, "Coffee. Thursday. Same place as before." Her response came immediately. "Thank you." Work consumed the next 2 days. We were finalizing a major contract with a healthcare system that wanted to implement our software across 15 hospitals. The negotiations were complex, the stakes high, and I was grateful for the distraction. This was the work that mattered, building tools that solved real problems, that made people's lives measurably better. Thursday morning, I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. The same barista with purple hair was working, and she nodded in recognition when I walked in. I ordered my usual and claimed the same corner table, away from the windows. Victoria arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather portfolio that looked expensive but worn, like she'd actually used it. She sat down across from me, ordered a cappuccino, and waited until the barista left before speaking. "I've been doing research," she said, opening the portfolio. Inside were printouts of articles, handwritten notes, what looked like a business plan, about arts education programs, about what works and what doesn't, about funding models and sustainability. I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I want to do something that matters." She pushed a portfolio toward me. "My family's foundation has been writing checks for decades. Big checks, to prestigious organizations, mostly so our name appears on buildings and in programs. But I started asking questions about impact, about outcomes, about whether any of it actually changes anything." She paused. No one could give me good answers. I flipped through her notes. They were thorough, detailed, showing genuine engagement with the material. She'd interviewed program directors, read academic studies, even visited some of the schools that benefited from the foundation's grants. "This is impressive," I said, meaning it. "I want to do what you did, not copy it, but learn from it, build something that actually works, that actually helps kids who need it." She met my eyes. "And I want your advice, not your money, not your endorsement. Just your honest opinion about whether this makes sense." I read through her proposal. It was rough, still more concept than plan, but the core idea was solid. A fellowship program that would pair artists with underserved schools, providing not just funding but mentorship, resources, sustained support. The budget was realistic. The timeline was ambitious but achievable. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because you're the only person I know who's actually done something like this. Everyone else in my circle just talks about philanthropy at dinner parties. You actually changed lives." She leaned forward. "And because I need someone to tell me if I'm fooling myself, if this is just another rich person's vanity project, or if it could actually work." I set the portfolio down and looked at her carefully. The armor was gone completely now. She looked nervous, uncertain, genuinely seeking guidance rather than validation. "It could work," I said slowly. "But not if you approach it the way your family's foundation approaches everything else. This can't be about your name on a building. It can be about photo opportunities or tax deductions or impressing your parents' friends." "I know." "Do you?" "Because the moment it gets hard, and it will get hard, you'll be tempted to fall back on what's comfortable. Writing a check and walking away. Delegating to people who don't care as much as you do. Letting it become just another line item in your foundation's annual report." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's why I need accountability. Someone who'll tell me when I'm taking the easy way out. And you think that's me?" "I think you're the only person who will." We sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop was filling up with the morning rush, people ordering lattes to go, students claiming tables with laptops, the ambient noise of a city waking up. Normal life, continuing around us while we talked about changing small pieces of it. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll look at this properly. Give me a week to review everything, talk to some people I know in arts education, see if there are gaps you haven't thought of." "Really? Really? But I'm not going to be gentle. If I think something won't work, I'll tell you. That's what I'm asking for." I finished my coffee and stood to leave. Victoria stood too, extending her hand. I shook it, feeling the shift between us, not quite friendship, but something more substantial than the awkward apology of a week ago. "One more thing," I said. "If you do this, you need to actually show up. Not just at galas and ribbon cuttings, but at the schools, with the kids, in the messy, complicated reality of trying to teach art to teenagers who've been told their whole lives that creativity is a luxury they can't afford." "I will," she said. "I promise." I believed her. Or at least, I believed she believed herself. Time would tell if that was enough. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines. I reviewed Victoria's proposal in the evenings, making notes, reaching out to contacts in education and nonprofit management. The more I looked at it, the more potential I saw, but also more challenges than she'd anticipated. On Sunday, I drafted a detailed response. Not just feedback on her proposal, but a roadmap for how to actually make it happen. The partnerships she'd need to build, the expertise she'd need to hire, the mistakes she should avoid because I'd already made them. I sent it to her with a simple note. "This is what it actually takes. Still interested?" Her response came an hour later. "More than ever. Can we meet next week to discuss?" I smiled despite myself. Maybe people could change. Maybe assumptions could be challenged. Maybe the world could become a little less cruel, one conversation at a time. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from Marcus Chen. "Thursday still work for you? I have some ideas I think you'll find interesting." I confirmed the meeting, then set my phone aside. The apartment was quiet, sunlight streaming through the windows, the city humming with life outside. I made tea and sat on my couch, thinking about the strange trajectory of the past 2 weeks. A month ago, I'd been invisible at events like the Metropolitan Gala. People looked past me, made assumptions, dismissed me as lucky or unimportant. Now I was getting calls from journalists, meeting with CEOs, mentoring someone who'd insulted me. The visibility was uncomfortable, but it was also creating opportunities not just for me, but for the work I cared about. Maybe that was the trade-off. Maybe being seen meant being vulnerable to judgment, but it also meant being able to influence, to guide, to help others avoid the mistakes you'd made. I thought about the kids in those after-school programs, learning violin and painting and theater. I thought about the girl who said she didn't know she could be an artist until someone showed her how. That was the point of all of this, not the recognition or the vindication or the moment when people realized they'd underestimated me. The point was creating space for people who'd been told they didn't belong, showing them they could build something beautiful anyway. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an unknown number. "Hi. This is Sarah Kim from the Foundation. We've had an overwhelming response to your donation. Would you be willing to speak at our annual fundraiser next month? We think your story could inspire other donors." I stared at the message for a long time. A month ago, I would have said no immediately. I would have protected my privacy, my anonymity, my carefully constructed boundaries. But sitting there in my quiet apartment, thinking about the ripple effects of visibility, I realized something had shifted. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. I typed back, "Tell me more about what you have in mind." The response came quickly. "Just 15 minutes. Share your story. Why you give. What it means to you. Nothing scripted. Just honest. Honest. I could do honest." "Okay," I wrote. "I'll do it." I set my phone down and looked around my apartment, the thrift store furniture, the sale rack clothes in my closet, the life I'd built carefully and quietly over years of hard work. Nothing about it had changed, but something in me had. I was still the same person who'd walked into that gala 2 weeks ago. Still the woman who'd grown up in a studio apartment where the heat didn't always work, who'd put herself through school waiting tables, who'd built a company from nothing but ambition and stubbornness. But now I was also the woman who'd stood on a stage and told her truth, who'd challenged assumptions and created space for difficult conversations, who'd decided that maybe visibility wasn't something to fear, but something to use. The sun was setting, painting my apartment in shades of gold and amber. I made dinner, ate it slowly, and spent the evening reading Victoria's proposal again, making more notes, thinking about how to help her succeed. This was the work now, not just building my own company, but helping others build theirs. Not just giving money, but giving knowledge, guidance, the benefit of lessons learned the hard way. It felt right. It felt like the next chapter of something I'd started years ago without realizing it. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from my mother. "Proud of you, Mija. Always have been." I smiled and typed back, "Love you too, Mom." Then I closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and sat in the quiet of my apartment as night fell over the city. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more decisions, more opportunities to choose between hiding and being seen. But tonight, I was just myself, and that was enough. Thursday morning arrived with Marcus Chen's meeting on my calendar. I'd chosen a restaurant in the financial district neutral territory, professional but not stuffy. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with his laptop open, reviewing something that had his full attention. "Thanks for meeting," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, confident without being aggressive. "I've been following your work for a while. What you did at the gala just confirmed what I already suspected, which is that you're building something that matters, and that you're doing it the right way." He gestured for me to sit. "Most people in our industry are chasing valuations and exits. You're chasing impact." I ordered coffee and waited for him to get to the point. In my experience, successful CEOs didn't ask for meetings just to offer compliments. "I want to propose a partnership," Marcus said, closing his laptop to give me his full attention. "Your platform solves problems in education and nonprofit management. Mine solves problems in healthcare access. There's overlap in our technology, in our values, in the communities we're trying to serve." "What kind of partnership?" "Strategic alliance. We share resources, technology, maybe some clients where it makes sense. We stay independent but work together on projects that align with both our missions." He paused. "And we pool our philanthropic efforts, create something bigger than either of us could do alone." I considered this carefully. Partnership sounded good in theory, but it often meant compromise, diluted vision, conflicts over direction and control. I'd built my company specifically to avoid those complications. "I'm not interested in merging," I said directly. "Neither am I. This isn't about acquisition or control. It's about amplification. You've proven you can create change. So have I. Together, we could create more." We talked for 2 hours. He showed me his company's work, a platform that connected underserved communities with healthcare resources, using technology to bridge gaps that had existed for decades. Thursday afternoon, I met Marcus Chen at a cafe in the financial district. He arrived in jeans and a hoodie, looking more like a graduate student than a CEO worth 9 figures. We shook hands and ordered coffee, then got straight to business. "I've been following your company for a while," he said, pulling out his tablet. "The work you're doing in healthcare infrastructure is exactly what the industry needs. Practical solutions, not flashy tech for tech's sake." "Thank you. I want to propose a partnership, not an acquisition, not an investment. A genuine collaboration." He showed me a presentation outlining how our technologies could integrate, creating something more powerful than either of us could build alone. "We handle the back-end architecture. You handle the user interface and implementation. Together, we could scale this to every major hospital system in the country." I studied the proposal carefully. It was ambitious but feasible, with clear delineation of responsibilities and equitable profit sharing. No hidden agendas, no attempts to absorb my company into his. "Why now?" I asked. "You could have reached out months ago." Marcus smiled slightly. "Honestly, I didn't think you'd take me seriously. You've turned down every partnership offer you've received. You're known for being fiercely independent." "I am. But after seeing what you did at the gala, not just a donation, but how you handled that moment, I realized something. You're not avoiding partnerships because you're afraid of losing control. You're avoiding them because most people don't share your values." He leaned forward. "I think we do share values. I mean, we talked for 2 hours, drilling into details, challenging each other's assumptions, finding common ground. By the time we finished, I had a stack of notes and a tentative agreement to move forward with. A Thursday morning arrived with Marcus Chen's meeting on my calendar and Victoria's revised proposals sitting in my inbox. I'd spent the previous evening refining my notes, thinking about sustainability models and partnership structures, the practical mechanics of turning good intentions into lasting change. The meeting with Marcus was at his office downtown, in one of those glass towers that reflected the sky. His assistant met me in the lobby and escorted me to the top floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the entire city. I could see my neighborhood from here, a small cluster of older buildings nestled between the new developments. Marcus stood when I entered, extending his hand. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of casual confidence that came from building something successful without inherited wealth. I recognized it because I'd worked hard to cultivate it myself. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I've been following your work for a while. The gala just gave me an excuse to finally reach out." We sat in chairs that probably cost more than my first car. His assistant brought coffee in actual mugs, not disposable cups, and left us alone. "I'll be direct," Marcus said. "I'm building a coalition of tech companies committed to social impact. Not just writing checks, but actually using our resources, technology, expertise, networks to solve problems that matter. I think your company would be a perfect fit." "What kind of problems?" "Education access, healthcare equity, economic mobility. The things that actually change lives, not just make headlines." He leaned forward. "I saw what you did with the arts education funding. That's the kind of thinking we need. Strategic, sustainable, focused on outcomes rather than optics." I sipped my coffee, considering. What would membership in this coalition require? Time, mostly. Quarterly meetings to share what's working and what isn't. Collaboration on joint projects when it makes sense. And a commitment to transparency about impact, real metrics, not just feel-good stories. Financial commitment? Only to your own projects. This isn't about pooling money. It's about pooling knowledge and amplifying what works. It was a good pitch. Smart, focused, aligned with values I actually held. But I'd learned to be cautious about commitments that sounded perfect. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take your time. We're not launching until next quarter anyway." He handed me a folder with more details. "Read through this. Talk to some of the other members if you want. Their contact information is in there." I glanced through the folder. Recognized several names, CEOs I respected, companies doing work I admired. This was legitimate. "I'll review it and get back to you," I said. We talked for another 20 minutes about our respective companies, the challenges of scaling while maintaining values, the constant tension between growth and mission. He understood the work in a way that most people didn't. By the time I left, I was genuinely considering his offer. That afternoon, I met Victoria at a small restaurant near my office. She'd brought her revised proposal, incorporating most of my feedback and adding research I hadn't even suggested. "I visited 3 schools this week," she said, spreading documents across the table. "Talked to teachers, administrators, some of the kids. You were right, it's messier and more complicated than I thought, but also more important." I read through her revisions. She'd addressed every concern I'd raised, found solutions to problems I'd identified, even anticipated challenges I hadn't mentioned. "This is good work," I said. "Good enough to actually do it?" "Good enough to start. You'll learn the rest as you go," she smiled. And for the first time since I'd met her, it looked genuine rather than practiced. "I want to do this right. Not for my family's reputation or my own ego. For the kids who need it, then you will." We spent the next hour going through implementation details, which schools to approach first, how to recruit artists for the fellowship program, what metrics to track. She took notes on everything, asked smart questions, pushed back when she disagreed with my suggestions. This wasn't someone looking for validation anymore. This was someone ready to do the work. When we finished, she gathered her papers and hesitated before speaking again. "I know I can't undo what I said at the gala. The assumptions I made, the way I dismissed you. But I want you to know that meeting you changed something in me. Made me question everything I thought I knew about success and worth and who deserves recognition." "Good," I said simply. "Question everything. That's how you grow." She nodded and left, and I sat alone at the table for a few minutes, thinking about transformation. How people could change when they were willing to be uncomfortable, to sit with their mistakes rather than defend them. My phone buzzed. A message from the foundation. "We've finalized the details for the fundraiser. Your speaking slot is confirmed for November 15th. Looking forward to hearing your story." November 15th. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to figure out what story I wanted to tell, How much of myself I was willing to share with a room full of strangers who would judge every word. I walked back to my office as the sun began its descent, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. The streets were crowded with people heading home from work, everyone moving with purpose toward their own lives, their own stories. I thought about the girl who'd said she didn't know she could be an artist until someone showed her how. I thought about Victoria, learning that privilege didn't excuse ignorance. I thought about all the assumptions people had made about me over the years, and how I'd spent so much energy trying to prove them wrong instead of just building the life I wanted. Maybe that was the story I needed to tell. Not about vindication or recognition, but about the quiet work of building something meaningful in a world that often couldn't see it until it was too big to ignore. Back at my office, I drafted an outline for the speech. Not a script. I'd never been good at reading from prepared remarks, but key points I wanted to hit. The teacher who'd stayed after school to teach me how to paint. The first investor who'd told me my idea would never work. The moment I'd realized that other people's limitations didn't have to become my own. I wrote until the office emptied around me, until the cleaning crew arrived and gave me knowing looks that said I worked too much. Then I saved the document, shut down my computer, and went home. The apartment was dark when I arrived. I turned on a single lamp and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights spreading in every direction. Somewhere out there, kids were learning to play instruments I'd helped provide. Victoria was probably still working on her proposal, refining details, preparing to do something that mattered. Marcus was building his coalition, trying to leverage success for social good. And I was here, in my small apartment, in my quiet life, having somehow become visible without meaning to. My phone rang. My mother, just calling to say goodnight, she said, and to tell you I'm proud of you. Not because of the gala or the articles or any of that. Because you've stayed yourself through all of it. Thanks, Mom. Get some sleep, Mija. Big things are coming. She was right. I could feel it, the shift, the momentum, the sense that something was beginning rather than ending. The gala had been a catalyst, but what came next was up to me. I made tea and sat on my couch with the speech outline, refining it, adding details, removing anything that felt performative or false. By midnight, I had something that felt true, something that honored where I'd come from while acknowledging where I was going. I saved it and closed my laptop. Tomorrow would bring more work, more decisions, more opportunities to choose between hiding and being seen. But tonight, I was just myself, in my small apartment, in my quiet life that had somehow become less quiet without losing what made it mine. The city hummed outside my window. I finished my tea, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed. Sleep came easily, dreamless and deep. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows and my phone was buzzing with a message from Victoria. First school meeting scheduled. Wish me luck. I smiled and typed back. You don't need luck. You've done the work. Then I got up, made coffee, and started my day. The same routine I'd had for years, but somehow different now. Lighter maybe, or just more purposeful. 3 weeks until the fundraiser. 3 weeks to prepare for the next chapter of whatever this was becoming. I was ready.